Hello, everyone. My name is Bryan Weeks. I am Technical Specialist with ATG USA. And today we're going to be talking about Revit 2020 and CTC Tools BIM Project Suite and using the Path of Travel, a new tool in Revit 2020, and the Occupancy Flow Analyzer, a tool within CTC Tools BIM Project Suite. Real briefly before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about Midwest University. It's coming up March 18th through the 19th at Mystic Lake Hotel and Casino in Minnesota. It's an AEC event, one of the biggest in the Midwest. And so we're still having an early bird discount has been extended for that. And you can still register by tomorrow and save $100. And ATG customers also, Autodesk customers also get an additional $100 in savings. So if you need more information on that, you can go to the link there at the bottom, midwest-u.com, get some more information, or you can contact your account executive and they'll be happy to help you out with that information. As I said, my name is Bryan Weeks. I've been in the business for approximately 20 years. I have experience in design and construction, project manager. You guys can see all that information there. So I've got quite a bit of experience in Revit. One thing I always like to talk about is the fact that nobody ever can know anything, all of it, about Revit. I think even Autodesk, there's people that are still learning stuff and new ways to use Revit. And so every time that I learn something new, I consider it definitely a learning experience because there's multiple techniques to do multiple things within Revit. So I don't claim to be an expert on anything that I'm talking about today, but it's information that I know how to discuss and share and talk about. So let's get started here and we'll talk about the course description. So Revit 2020 had basically an update with a lot of multiple different tools that were included in Revit 2020. And one of those that's been requested for quite a while was a path of travel. The path of travel tool in Revit lets you analyze the travel distances and does a couple of other things of letting you analyze that data. Whereas CTC BIM Project Suite, we have an Occupancy Flow Analyzer, which also can calculate the possible paths, distances, and calculations, and can do kind of a little bit more than the 2020, but the 2020 is still a great tool to have in your arsenal. And then adding the CTC tools to that will help with your projects and your project manager's code analysis and speed up that workflow for you to save you some time. So to start off, we're going to talk about creating a path of travel and scheduling that path of travel in 2020. And so with 2020, it allows you to select a start point and an end point. Don't know how many of you have used this new tool yet, but it's pretty cool just because, yeah, you click once, click twice, and it makes a path. And I'll show you a little video here in a second of how that works. It actually avoids contact with the model elements. You can tag the lines with distances and travel times. You can also change the line style of that path of travel, and you can also schedule. Now, the drawback is that 2020 still can't auto-calculate room occupancy, or can it generate egress pathing for multiple levels. So it only works on whatever level you're currently creating your path of travel. First floor, second floor, third floor, you have to do each of those separately. So I remember the days of, having to measure out each line. This definitely, and adding those numbers, this definitely speeds up that process. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. Just open up a basic file here for our CTC office building, and I'm going to open our code plan. And the new tools are under your Analyze tab, and Route Analysis. You have Path of Travel and a Reveal Obstacles selection as well that can show hidden elements that maybe the path is going around. Now, Route Analysis also has some settings under it. You can select what items you would like to include as an obstacle or as not an obstacle, excuse me. And right now I just have doors selected. That's our primary focus. Walls, windows, various items in there that you can have that control over and select. Now, the other thing that you can do with the path of travel is select your analysis zone and the height. And I just hit the help button there, and it kind of shows you a little graphic of what that looks like. Distance above the floor and distance height above the floor for that path of travel. And those can be adjusted within Revit. Didn't change any of that. I'm just going to click on the first one and click your first selection where you want it to start, and then select the exit that you want to travel to, and it automatically generates it. Now, I have some crop regions that are in this model that I'm using for different tutorials that I show, and so that arrow that popped up, that's all that was, is kind of saying, hey, we have troubles calculating around crop regions. Make sure that you're showing what you want to show. And there you select the second exit, and I could also do that third one down there to generate those paths. So pretty easy, just looking at that right off the bat. Just generate it. Now I'm going to tag it. There's not one loaded, so I'm going to load one. Comes with Revit 2020. It's a tag, path of travel family tag. So we'll go ahead and scroll down here, load our path of travel. Now, you can adjust this family to include more information if you so choose. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time here talking about family creation and changing families, but you could always add more information, change the text, change the font size, whatever your firm's standard may be. But it gives you that distance, and of course I'm pointing there at the speed. Right now in Revit, the base speed is 3 miles per hour, and so it'll calculate that travel distance based on that 3 miles per hour. There's not an option that I'm aware of to change that yet within Revit. It could be probably a global parameter, but I didn't dig into that. 3 miles per hour sounded about right, so I haven't changed that. So the next thing we're going to do, now that we created our lines and we tagged them, you also have the ability within Revit, you can change the line styles of those. So if your office has standards that you want to see portrayed in the drawing, you can, of course, path of travel is a generated line style once you start drawing with the path of travel tool. And of course, straight up changing line styles, all of us have done before. Change your widths, change your color, and all of that can be done within the generated line. Now, the next thing I might want to do, what if I want 2 different ones? What if I want to show one that's the longer one a different color? Or maybe I'm going to have a legend that says, well, this one is per this code and this other one is per this code. Or maybe I just want to be different and show the client a colorful code plan. It's your office decision as to how you want to set these up, but you do have that ability to change the graphics and change the line style to various colors and line types. So the last thing we're going to look at with Revit 2020 is scheduling. So within the base settings of Revit with the path of travel tool, I'm going to go ahead and create a new schedule, and I'm basing that off of those path of travel lines. And then I'm going to select the fields that I want to portray. So first thing I'm going to have is my mark, which will be the line name, length, and speed. And there's some other options you can add there too: room, from room, levels, various things you can add. But I'm just kind of making it simple today to show you the capability of the Revit 2020 line path of travel tool. So now that I have my schedule, I'm going to go ahead and go to my safety sheet, and we can drag in our schedule for our path of travel. Again, you can modify the look, the font within Revit, just like you always do within the Revit settings. And then our code plan showing our paths. You may choose to add a legend showing the line types, various additional information that you can add depending on what your office standard is. So real basic, that's kind of just right off the cuff going into the 2020 path of travel. So that's really what that tool has available for architects to use within Revit. So using CTC tools, we're going to create an occupancy flow analysis. And CTC tools was created by CTC software, and they're add-ins and content packs for Revit, Civil 3D that can be added into your Revit and actually become a separate tab under your Revit tabs. The cool thing about CTC tools is that they are free to download, and you can try them out with full functionality for 14 days. All the tools are fully usable during that time frame. And it really gives you a chance to play with any of the tools that we're talking about today. I'm going to show you a couple in addition to the Occupancy Flow Analyzer, because there's some other tools that are really helpful with what we're going to be trying to do today with this analysis. So the Occupancy Flow Analyzer is used as a design aid, and it has a lot of oomph built into it, a lot of background stuff that you can do with your calculations that normally in the previous Revit world would be taking place outside of Revit. You'd have to have a pen and paper, calculate your toilet count, you calculate your occupancy. There's so much stuff that as a project manager, I would have to do on I'd use Revit to create my plans, and then I'd have to create a area schedule of my rooms, and then that would tell me what my areas were. And you know the drill, you have to calculate each room, calculate the occupancy based on the IBC and whatever the building type is, and then the use of the room. So it was a very long drawn out process. And then once I did it on paper, well, now I've got to put all that information back into Revit. Well, with the CTC tools, you can use this information and actually generate all this information within Revit. So no more pen and paper. And I'm going to show you how to do that using the Revit 2020 and our CTC tools. So I'm going to tab over here back to our familiar CTC office building. And I didn't mention at the beginning, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to use the chat, type up your questions in the chat, and I can answer those at the end of the presentation. So be happy to try to answer any questions, or if you have some constructive information that, well, maybe I did something a little different. Like I said, Revit has multiple ways to do things, and so I'm always happy to learn new stuff as well. So, all right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Here's our plan. And CTC software, we have a couple of suites. We have the Batch Suite, Data Suite, Manager Suite, and then the BIM Project Suite. These are all these icons are separate programs within those suites that do a lot of different stuff. And like I said, all of these are free for 14 days. You can download the different suites, try them out. After that 14 days, you can notice that some of these have lighter icons and darker icons. Well, the lighter icons, those are free for as long as you have that installed on your computer. You can continue using these icons. The darker icons, those will go away after the 14 days, but we hope you'll enjoy it enough that you install it and you purchase it. You can talk to your ATG representative about that, about prices and information on that program. If you'd like to have us present for your BIM manager any one of these suites, definitely contact your ATG representative and we can get something scheduled. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a look, jump right in here to Occupancy Flow Analyzer. So Occupancy Flow Analyzer, there's a lot of data in here, and I typically, when I'm using this as part of my workflow for the projects I'm working on, I'll go from left to right and I can use these tabs and kind of follow along. So right off the bat, you want to look at your settings. And with the Occupancy Flow Analyzer, the occupant path settings, you can specify things that you're not wanting to run into when it creates the path. So impassable objects, and you can select them. You can pick different categories. Right now we just have our base elements selected. These we don't want to have our line go across. You can also specify your options for your analysis, spatial elements, rooms, areas, spaces. You can also ignore certain size areas if you so choose. And then you also can pick the parameters. So these are all parameters within your Revit file based, created from the CTC tools. But I'm going to use Occupancy CTC, and that uses a chart to calculate my occupant load. You can also modify your width factor based off of the IBC. Of course, we have it just at the base right now, the 0.02, but if you need to modify, you can. And also you can tell it what kind of output. Do I just want one path or do I want all paths? And today we're just going to show you all paths to show you the strength of this tool and how fast it can actually generate all your occupancies. Now, the first thing we need to do, I'm going to zoom in here, and if you notice, because this is a test plan that I use for a lot of presentations, some of these rooms don't have occupancies in them. Well, in fact, none of them do. So I need to generate my occupancies for your rooms, for the rooms first, in order to generate my paths. Well, as part of the room parameter, you actually come in, and these rooms actually have categories that associate with a IBC chart within Revit that tell it what that occupancy of that room is going to be. So all this work is kind of done for me now. Of course, you'd have to do it when you do your project, but that chart's in there for you to select those rooms. So now I'm going to come over here to my occupant load calculations. I'm going to tell it I want an area per person using the CTC parameter. I'm going to redistribute my occupant load. So if I come out with like an odd or an even number, or like a decimal, then those redistribute uniformly across across the project. It's going to tell me what groups I'm going to round up or level at level, excuse me. And then this is the parameter it's going to store my results in. You can create your own. If you have a company standard, you can have occupancy for whatever your company, but this is going to create an actual parameter within Revit that stores all this information. And that's what we're going to be able to generate all of our calculations from, for not only our occupant flow and our paths, but also our schedules later on when we start calculating our plumbing fixtures. So I'm going to go ahead and hit calculate. Now we get an error because some of my stuff in here is, like I said, this is a tutorial plan, so I've got some AutoCAD links and things. So path flow does not calculate AutoCAD links, and so that's kind of telling me, hey, some of these things aren't right, but I know they're not right, and so they're okay. But if you're working on it and stuff comes up, go ahead and take a look at those and see what's going on. Okay, so that was it. That was done. So now you can see all my rooms based on their areas and whatever their occupancy classification is, has calculated and put that number in all my rooms that have a classification. If it's not a classified room, it doesn't have a number. Easy peasy. Now that I've done that, I'm going to hop back over here to my critical occupant paths tab. You can also do a shortest path, which generates much like Revit 2020 does with their new app, or their new path of travel. You can generate one individual path if you so choose. But like I said, today I'm going to go ahead and do all critical paths. On level 1, you can actually do multiple levels simultaneously, but for calculation's sake, I'm just going to do one. And then down here, it's going to ask you what target objects are you shooting for as an exit. So I've already got my doors selected. I show you, you can hit show elements and you can see I've got the doors selected that I want to exit at. That's it. So now I'm going to hit Find Path, and it's going to take a second here, and you can see the progress bar at the bottom. It's going to generate my geometry information. And it's going to pop up with an element. Again, geometry, we've got some AutoCAD stuff that it doesn't like when you link AutoCAD because it's an element in the plan, but it can't calculate it as a solid or, you know, a Revit type object. So it just gives you a warning about that. Step 5 of 7, it's analyzing the paths. Okay, so now it's going to pop up with a report. I can actually save this as an Excel file and export it and use it as a chart later if I so choose. And it's showing me those 4 doors, what the capacity is of those doors by the width that I expressed, the 0.02, what the load is, and the travel distance. Now this one's coming up at 0 because it's way over here. This building's actually like a multi-use building, and it kind of comes up here. So even though this is on, you know, it goes up to the 2nd floor and back down. So even though this is showing up on the 1st level, it's not connected to the 1st level. So it's not receiving any load from this 1st floor area. So that's why it comes up 0. I'm just going to hit OK on that, and it's going to finish up. Now, this happens a lot when you're in Revit as an architect. You're like, okay, I know I just drew that. Nothing showed up. Why isn't it there? Okay, well, if you go to a different plan, such as my 1st floor, there's all my paths that it generated, but they're not showing up in my code plan. Well, as an architect, I don't know how many hours I've spent messing around with myself, BIM manager, and other people, and we sit around and we mess with this for 30 minutes trying to figure out why stuff isn't showing up. Well, one of these tools within the CTC Project Suite is called Invisibility Advisor. And this is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. I've been with ATG since August. And as an architect, I wish I had had this 15 years ago because I could have saved a whole lot of time. Invisibility Advisor will let you find items that are missing in one, or showing in one view but missing in another view. So let me show you how easy this is. So these are showing up in this view. I'm going to select it. So now it shows up. There's my path. And you're saying, well, why isn't it showing up? Hold on, let me hit exit here. Oh, it did this the other day. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Let me save. That's why it hadn't saved. Okay, try this again. I apologize. This isn't working for me. Sorry about that. So a lot of times, because we're using templates, if I don't save in between while I'm working on multiple presentations, it will do that. That's not a typical situation though. Okay, so CTC, I want to find out why this isn't showing up in my code plan. I apologize. Okay, so I generated my paths. Trying to get it to show up in my plan. There it goes. Sorry about that. My Revit was giving me issues. So by selecting the path in my floor plan, and then I can select my target view where it's hidden, which is my code plan, I can hit Find Element. And so what this does is it gives you your options as to why this element isn't showing up. So the number one is view range is hiding the element. So I'm going to flip back over to the code plan before I hit fix. So this is your easy fix. You hit the button and it pops up. So now the other thing I've noticed is that my path it's making paths around furniture, but I can't see it. And I can't see it there either. Well, why isn't this showing up? So if I go to hidden, I can see my furniture is hidden. So same thing. Why isn't it showing up in my other view? So I can select it, select where the element's hidden, which is my code plan. I can go back to my code plan, find the element, and it's going to give me some options. It's going to say, well, here's some things that could be wrong. And categories turned off. Is that the problem? No. How about the view range setting? Yes. So despite having to restart my Revit, it actually did do that fairly quickly and help me find the solution to why stuff wasn't showing up. So let me get back my PowerPoint there, sorry. Okay, so we've used the Invisibility Advisor, turn that on, and we've tabbed through. We can look at our paths that this generated, and it shows you all the different points that it generated for the path of travel. And at each of those points, you can actually select that point and see how many occupants are at each of those paths. So that may help you in some of your code analysis to generate that information as well. So you're kind of like, okay, well, that's pretty much what the Revit Path of Travel tool does, except you did it all at once. You know, you created a bunch of paths. Well, the one thing that the Revit Path of Travel doesn't do is multiple floors. And the CTC Tools Occupancy Flow Analyzer does multiple floors. So let me show you how this works. I go to my shortest path. I'm at my 4th floor plan. I'm going to pick a start point. Oh, actually, let me do that on my code plan. I almost did it on the wrong sheet. I'm going to pick my start point up here in this conference room. I'm going to go back down here to the 1st floor and tell it I want to exit, say, this door. And then I'm going to find the path. Calculating, getting your element geometry information. Again, there's Revit geometry AutoCAD geometry in there that it doesn't like, but we're okay with that. We just want to keep analyzing the paths. Now this is a single path from the 4th floor to the 1st floor. It's going to show you your warning messages. Well, it's got 2 items that I know, because this is my file, that are drawn in CAD and are not real elements and not Revit elements. So it's just saying, hey, we can't do anything with this as a calculatable family. Okay, so there is my path that it generated. And you're like, okay, well, that's great. How do I know that's really doing what it's doing? Well, let's go to 3D. Check that out. It went all the way down the stairs from the conference room and down. You can also change that line. You know, you can modify it by overriding. You can do filters. If you want to just change the color, maybe you're doing a 3D cutaway for, code, whatever floats your boat. You can do solid, bright red, maybe maybe 10, whatever you want to do, but you can do that on multiple levels from multiple spots, and it generates all that data for you as well as to what your occupancy flow is going to be. So if I go back out, how many people are coming out that door? I can select from that path. Well, one occupant, and that's because I haven't run my occupancy analysis on the 4th floor. So we've got one person on the whole 4th floor, but you get what I'm saying. Now we've generated all these paths. Now what are we going to do with them? Well, we're going to go ahead and make schedules for our code sheets. So let me flip back over here and flip this. And so when you create a code sheet, you recall I showed you earlier, you're able to generate a path of travel, and basically you can show the path of travel, name it, show the distance, the time it takes to go from point A to point B. Well, traditionally when you do that, your calculations, like I've said, they're outside, and now you want to do it inside. And then you have to create a spreadsheet, and then you have to insert that spreadsheet into Revit. And you can't really edit the spreadsheet in Revit unless it's a real schedule. And if you do a schedule in Revit, you can't treat it as an Excel file. You can't do complex math. You can't do calculations. You can't enter formulas. So there's a whole lot of stuff that as architects we would have to do outside of Revit, then bring inside of Revit. Well, with 2 of these different tools, 3 tools, Occupancy Flow Analysis, of course, but then the Spreadsheet Link and the Schedule Excel, you can now calculate those within Revit using the CTC tools. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that as well. So if I flip back over here to my Revit, and the first thing I'm going to do is show you up here on the top bar, Schedule Excel, and it creates schedules and treats it just like a spreadsheet, and then it saves it. You can export it as a spreadsheet, but the difference is that if you make changes either from without Revit, outside of Revit, or if you make changes in Revit using Schedule Excel, you can update the values of those schedules. Pretty much it's like live. It's like a live generation. Spreadsheet Link is what lets you create the spreadsheets within Revit and a spreadsheet program using data values that are present within your Revit model. So, and I'm going to show you how that works. So the first thing we're going to do is Spreadsheet Link. And so here we open up a window that shows our spreadsheet, and over here in our settings, I'm going to scroll down here to rooms. There's a whole lot of stuff. You can select category type schedules. You can generate schedules from walls, windows, anything that is a category currently within your Revit model, you can create a schedule from using this plugin. And so I'm going to select rooms. And so now what it's going to do is it's going to show me all the available parameters for every room parameter that I have in my project. There's 2 different kinds, instances and types, and they're shown as different colors. So in most cases, you can tell that these are almost all instance parameters. You can also use filters to find specific, to add parameter filters, or you can sort. Today, I'm just going to show you kind of the basics. We do have presentations where we can go more in depth on these different plugins. Today, I'm just kind of show you scratch the surface. And so we're going to go ahead and select room, and then we're going to add our parameters. So first thing I need to do is add my room number, and you can see it pops up over here as I click it. And then I'm going to click the number, and then I'm going to select the name. And then the next thing I'm going to select is the area, because I have to have something to calculate off of. Now this area per person is based off the schedule that we have within this file that specifies what the room type is and what the value, the calculated area per person value is based off of. It's based off of IBC, but of course it's whatever you want it to be in that schedule. And then I'm going to select occupancy, CTC. And this is my calculated occupancy from the, now admittedly, this is just the, most of this is just the first floor, I think. There's some on other floors that look like they've been calculated. But remember, I only ran the occupancy at that time for the first floor. I could have done the whole building at one time if I so choose, you know, if I chose to. Okay, so there's my rough schedule, just spreadsheet link. And if I save it, you know, save it to a file. Whoops, wrong side. I want to save my spreadsheet. So I'm going to save it just as an occupancy room schedule. And then I want to open it. And if I open it, it you know, it opens in my spreadsheet program, whichever one you use. But the important thing is that it's generated it based off of values I created. And that's just using the spreadsheet link. Now what I want to do is get that schedule into my Revit. It's not there yet. It's still outside. So I'm going to use Schedule Excel. And I'm going to add two different schedules. One is the occupancy room schedule, which is the one we just created. You can name it whatever view you want, occupancy schedule, and schedule view or drafting view. So it can actually change it to, you know, a static spreadsheet type looking file, or schedule, which is one that I can edit. We want to keep it as a schedule, and it will generate it, and it's done successfully. And if I come over here to my schedules, there's my occupancy schedule. Oh, it pulled it up. So there's the one we just generated as a schedule. Now the next thing I'm going to do, just for time saving, I have have a spreadsheet that calculates all my water closets, urinals, all my plumbing calcs based off of my original occupancy calculations and my schedule. So there's multiple different methods there, depending on what the occupancy type is. But it's taken all this information that we've generated using the Occupancy Flow Analyzer and the values that we've given it based off of IBC occupancy totals, and generated, calculated these numbers. You can see how it uses formulas just like Excel does, but we're within Revit. This is all running within Revit. And that's the beauty of these plugins, is that we can now make changes, modify formulas, include new formulas. I can come in here and add new cells and new values, and this is all generated within Revit to where I can instantly make changes, copy, paste, drag. You know, you can't do this in Revit like in the Revit schedule creator. You can't copy, you can't copy cells. So there's a lot of advantages of this. So we're getting close here of having our spreadsheets completed, but now I want to put them on a sheet. And so I can create new views based on these tabs. Now I can do it one at a time, or I can do multiple work sets, and I can come down here and select it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the method 3, which is based off of the office occupancy, office calculation, 1 per 25 for first 50, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to do that for all of these. So I now have 4 schedules that it's going to have calculations and export. No, I don't need to change anything. No. All right, I guess it's going to make me. And now it tells you here are these schedules that are that you've created in Revit. And so later on, if I need to go back and change it or auto update it, I can change the schedules and it will auto update when I open the schedule Excel. And now I can scroll down here to my schedules. And there's my various calculations. And so after all that, now the next thing I want to do is put them on a sheet. So I'm going to go down here to my code sheet. And you can drag your plan. And then you can get your schedules and arrange those, however you need to have those arranged. Change colors, maybe you don't want colors, maybe you just want white. Change it to whatever method you need. And now I'm going to go ahead and drop these in to my code sheet. And the cool thing is because these are all schedules that are created in the same size, the same values on the cells, now you can actually drag and drop them to match up just like an IBC schedule. So, when you turn it into the code officials, they recognize, this method and this order of how those line up. And there's all the calculations. And again, it's all within Revit. So if any of these rooms change, perhaps our training room here gets smaller. We want a bigger sales area, so you clip that and it goes farther, farther down and makes a smaller room. Run your flow analyzer, or I'm sorry, not your flow analyzer. Well, it's the flow analyzer, but it's the load calculations and recalculate your rooms. And that's the cool thing about it, is that you can just automatically update those numbers as they change. And then once these numbers change, your plumbing numbers will automatically update as well. All because it's within Revit and there are parameters within Revit that have values. All right, well, that kind of concludes that presentation. Thank you all for bearing with me as I had to restart Revit. I've been hard at work on this computer and had to restart it, but that's fine. If anyone has any questions, I don't see any on chat, or you can open it up. Oh, here's one. Is there a way to edit the path of travel in Revit 20, make it more linear or 90-degree turns? I don't believe there is because, well, let me do it. Let's find out here. I don't think there is, though, because of the path that it generates. Let me do it on the code plan. I'll go to the second floor here. And where's my stairs? So there's my stairs. Let's start back here at this office. And actually, there's some stairs there. Let's see what happens. Unable to find a route, crop region. Okay, am I goofing up here? So even the Revit's giving me an issue. Let me do it on the first floor where there's maybe not anything hidden. Crop region, calculate ramps for stairs. Hold on, let me reopen my file here. It may be giving me some issues because I've done all this other stuff within Revit in this file. Question was, can you receive or will you receive a copy of the recording We are recording this and it will be posted on the ATG. I think it's the ATG Facebook. I'll have to, Justin, I'll have to get with Sean. She's one of the hosts, and I don't see her in here at the moment. But if you want an individual copy of it, talk to your ATG representative, and then they can get you in touch with Sean to try to get that if you need like a hard copy or something. There you go. So yeah, something was weird. All right, so let's take a look. It does not look like, well, you can add a waypoint maybe. And then can you edit that waypoint? Yes, you can. So it looks like you can modify that somewhat. Now, I know some firms, I've worked at quite a few firms over 20 years. Some like to have the angular, straight lines this way, 90 degree. That's definitely something that you could do. It looks like it snaps to it. It's kind of giving me some issues with that door because it's wanting to go right through the middle of the door. Personally, I mean, it sounds like it might just be creating extra work for you. When it does it, you do it in 10 seconds, or you can mess around with it for 30 minutes trying to make them straight. But if that's your office standard, I totally get it. Maybe you want to do some detail lines, and that way you have something to snap to. The other thing I was going to show you, and I forgot to show as well, was the update feature. And CTC Tools Occupancy does this as well. It's just really cool, though. I like to see it. I like to see it in action. So if I'm going to put a desk here, let's say, I know this doesn't make any sense because it's blocking the path. But if I was to go up here and hit update, select an update, then it's going to kind of move. See how that moves around? The other cool thing is that if you move a wall, let's say that room got bigger. Now, no, it's not a 5-foot path. I'm just trying to show an example. But let's say a wall moved over your path. You can update it and it will regenerate and go around that as well. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today and sitting in on this. It's some really cool tools that not only Revit has added, but that CTC Tools has developed. And the longer I work here, the more I use these in my day-to-day workflow. And again, if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff that you would like to see presented, either via Zoom or video conference, or if you're local to any of our offices, we've done presentations or lunches before too. If you invite us to come by, that's stuff we can talk about. But there are 14 days to download for free, and or download and try out for free. And we hope that you guys enjoyed the presentation today. I appreciate it. Thank you.